Hey everyone, this is just going to be a casual update about how I'm going with my projects, my yarn no-buy, and my goals for the year. I have a project here I'd love to work on, but it is too complicated for me to read the pattern and talk to you at the same time, but I welcome you to find something to work on while you listen. I'll try to sit outside here. It's a lovely evening until such time as my neighbours start to mow their lawns. Or it starts to rain, which it is threatening to do. Oh, and the sun's about to set. So let's just get straight into it. It's come to my attention that I don't think I've ever explicitly introduced myself to you. My name is Shan. The channel name, Shan Over, is a play on words. It might actually only work if you have certain types of accents, but there's not much you can do about that. I started knitting in December of 2023, so I've been learning for 16 months now, and I'm really glad to have you here. To be completely honest, this video is a chance for me to just catch my breath, get realigned with my kind of knitting intentions for the year. Work has been really high intensity, so unfortunately I haven't had as much space, time, mental energy to focus on my knitting as I would have liked. I usually get my knitting done on my commute to work. I catch the bus, and that means it's about an hour or an hour and a half every day I have to knit. Lately, the buses have been really overfull. So if they turn up, they're usually late, and usually there's no space for me to sit. So I have been standing on the bus to work lately, which really cuts into my knitting time. And then when I get home, I'm often just too tired to focus anyway. So yeah, I really haven't been making the progress that I would have hoped for. In better news, autumn has arrived. So the last week or so has had some really crisp mornings. I love autumn time. The leaves are starting to fall off the trees here. Yeah, it's my birthday in autumn, so that's in a few weeks' time. I'm really excited about that. And it's given me a bit of a moment of clarity that if I don't start knitting some things now, I'm not going to be able to wear them in winter. Also, in other good news, I'm going to a knitting event this weekend. So I'm going to Crafty Cinema, which is where they put on a movie and they leave the house lights turned halfway up so you can knit or read or whatever while you're watching the movie. I've been to one of these before. That time we watched Love Actually. And this time we're going to be watching Legally Blonde. So I'm really excited about that. And I'll talk about it in a minute, but I need a project to take with me for the movie. So in classic knitting podcast format, I'm going to go over my finished objects. So since this is the first video like this I've done, I want to just recap everything that I've knit since the beginning of the year. So I'll start off with my felted beret. All these projects I've made separate videos about them, so I'll link to those. Feel free to go and watch them after this one. This was something I cast on around New Year's time. I wanted an opportunity to use this boucle yarn, and it didn't quite work out how I expected, so I did a bit of modifications on the fly and I turned it into a felting project. When it came down to it though, I didn't knit it big enough to felt it properly, so I had to also do some beret surgery and graft in some additional rows and then do the felting. So that was quite a lot of fun. I'm really happy with the finished object. I'm really looking forward to wearing this. I think this is something that while I knit it in the summertime, it made me think of snowy winter days. Not that it snows where I live, but it made me imagine snowy winter days. Yeah, I'm really happy with how it looks. It fits pretty well, and it only took me honestly a few days of knitting. So all in all, I'm really happy with that project. That one took me about 61 grams of yarn. Next up is of course my Nord sweater. So this was cast on with the intention of achieving a couple of my goals for the year, which were to learn how to knit a circular yoke and to do some stranded colourwork. I had tried it before, but I never finished a garment or accessory with colourwork. So this is that experiment. I'm very pleased with how this turned out. I knit this pretty much throughout January and February. And as you can see, I did not have enough yarn to make the sleeves full length. I talk all about that in the video about this project. this was really inspired by these yarns. I found these yarns secondhand as a lot, and I thought they would just make a beautiful kind of colourwork palette. I don't know if the previous owner of them maybe had bought them for that reason too. I don't know. And I'm glad to say that I was right. It looks gorgeous. I mentioned it in the other video, but I just think these kind of look like hard-boiled eggs, which I think is funny. But yeah, in this project I learnt the new techniques of a Russian join as a way to join yarns, and as I mentioned, circular yoke and stranded colourwork. I also did some waist shaping. I've done waist shaping before, but this is the first kind of semi-successful waist shaping I've ever done. And it's a lovely piece to wear, and I've worn it many times already. It's actually very practical having a short sleeve knit, so I'll probably do more of them in the future. And that sweater weighs 341 grams in total. On to my third and final finished object for the year so far is my beanie. This is a beanie knit following the Scone Run hat pattern. This beanie came out of a bit of a late entry to my goals for the year, which is to participate in a test knit. So I saw this test knit being spoken about on Instagram, and I decided to jump headfirst and get stuck in. I love the finished object, fits me really well. I love the yarn that I used. I think the variegation is really pretty. It was kind of a scrap ball, so 50 gram ball of yarn, so it wasn't really enough to make a full beanie with on its own. So I did some clever kind of hidden scrap yarn. So the wrong side of the brim is in just a plain grey, and the underneath of the brim is also grey. So that way it looks fully variegated, but I was able to stretch it out because in the end this hat also weighs 61 grams, which is the same as this beret. So I would have been 11 grams short if I had tried to knit it all in the variegated yarn. I'm really proud of myself for joining a test knit. Yeah, I met some cool people on there. I had an interesting challenge in that I was trying not to overly modify the pattern. I tend to modify patterns pretty willy-nilly if I'm struggling with something. So this really forced me to try to adhere to the pattern where I could. If you watch the video all about this project, you'll know that I did have a lot of trouble with the gauge. I feel like a broken record, but I'm a really loose knitter, so I just couldn't achieve gauge with the suggested yarn. And then after all the knitting, it was too short. I have a pretty big head, so I had to also do some more beanie surgery. So that's 2 hats that I've knit this year that I had to add extra length to. Note to self, I have a really big head apparently. Can't wait for the mornings to be cold enough to warrant wearing this. I know it looks a bit funny off the head, but I promise it looks normal on. Yeah, so that means I have knit 3 projects in 3 months, which puts me on track to knit 12 projects this year. My goal for the year was 10. Last year I managed to knit 14, so I'm hoping that if I can pick up the pace a little bit more, that I'll be able to knit 14 projects again this year, but I'd be very happy with 10 or 12 also. Next, I want to move on to my works in progress. I really only have one to show you. This right here is the low tide sweater. This is designed by Unwind Knitwear, and it is a lace and cables saddle shoulder pullover. Saddle shoulder is also on my list of to-dos for the year, and I'm most of the way through the kind of neckband and shoulder setup, and I've got to tell you, this pattern is incredible. It's very detailed and obviously a very intricate knit, and you've kind of got to trust the process. So the pattern is mostly written out in long form, but there are some charts too, which I prefer personally. Look at that. But it just is quite well thought out in that clearly she's done a lot of work to make the pattern contiguous so that you're not having to break the yarn unnecessarily, but also all the cables line up, and there are cables all throughout the neckband that flow into the shoulders and the front, and there's a lot of short row shaping. So she's kind of reverse engineered exactly when you need to turn and when you need to do cables so that it all comes together in the end. This is a pattern that I don't think you could wing. I don't think you could modify this without having knit it before. It would just be too difficult to kind of reverse engineer those numbers without at least having knit it once. I did make one very small modification, which is in lengthening the neckband. So before any of that complicated shaping, I just did an additional repeat of the pattern, so an additional 4 rows, just to make the neckband a little bit longer, because I don't like crew necks that are too loose. And I was looking at some of the pattern photos and I thought a couple of them looked a little loose. So just to be on the safe side, I have lengthened it. When it comes to needle size, I did the neckband on 2.5mm needles, and I have switched to 3.5mm needles for the rest of the body. Looking like I'll get gauge, or even maybe a little bit tight on gauge. The recommended needles for the body are 3.5mm, so this is one of the first times that I've ever been able to follow the designer's recommended needles and get gauge. Oh, and of course, I can't believe I haven't talked about the colour of it yet. This colour is insane. It's beautiful. This is Knit Picks Gloss Decay in the colour Kenai. It's a beautiful, very saturated teal colour. And I literally cannot wait to wear this. It has a beautiful shine to it because there's silk in the yarn blend. I think it's going to be incredible. I'm loving following the pattern. You do have to focus, so that's why I can't knit and talk to you at the same time. You've really got to be reading the lines. But I think once I'm through the shoulders and the yoke, it should be a bit more smooth sailing. I already feel like I've started to get the pattern, the kind of main pattern chart memorized. Yeah, and I'll share with you guys when I am closer to being finished with that. And this isn't really a work in progress, but I do need something to knit on during the crafty movie this weekend. So I was thinking I might want some socks, and I do want some socks before it gets cold. So I don't want anything too intricate that I couldn't focus on properly. So I was thinking I'd like to knit some slouchy home socks, kind of like bed socks or something you just wear at home. I recently borrowed from the library the Lane 52 Weeks of Socks Volume 2 book, the new one. And I had a look through there and I did find one pattern that I really like the look of. It's a brioche slouchy sock. Brioche is another thing that's on my bingo list for the year. So I was looking around for some yarn today for it, and I found this in my collection. This is Delicious Yarns Desert Tweed Light. My sister bought this for me when she was traveling overseas. She went to the US, she went to Arizona, and she went to a local yarn store there, bless her. I asked her to get me some sock yarn. She asked the lady at the shop to point her towards sock yarn. This is what they picked out. It's a beautiful tweedy brown with kind of a streak of orange in it, which I think will make some orange little strips. I've just realized today though that it is actually not sock yarn in that it doesn't have nylon. It is 85% superwash merino and 15% Donegal tweed. I was thinking about whether that means I wouldn't use it, but honestly, these socks I have in mind, which are quite loose and, you know, brown and orange, are maybe not socks I would wear out. I just wear them in the house. It's also quite a high twist yarn, and I've been able to get pretty tight gauges with some really small needles for socks, so I think it might be a fun experiment just to make these socks, even though they don't have nylon in them, and then maybe just keep track of how long it takes them to wear out in comparison to my socks with nylon in them. Let me know if that's a terrible idea, but yeah, I wouldn't be wearing them with shoes or like out and about. So this is the point in the podcast where I think most people would talk about their yarn acquisitions. I am going to talk about my non-acquisitions. You might know this already, but I have plans for a no-buy year. I already have quite a hefty yarn stash, and I am planning not to buy any new or secondhand yarn for the rest of the year until I have some plans to go overseas later in the year, and when I do that, I'll let myself buy some yarn there. So I'm kind of saving my yarn buying for then. It's been going really well. I have no new yarn acquisitions in the first 3 months of the year, which is crazy because last year I was buying like kilos and kilos of yarn every month. In fact, I'm actually down, I think, 470 grams for the year so far. So that's good. It's not that I haven't been tempted. I mean, I have stopped going on Facebook Marketplace. I have stopped going to op shops, which is where I got a lot of my yarn from. But I have been watching knitting podcasts, knitting YouTube videos, and I was recently rewatching some old Two Pearls in a Pod videos, and the yarn that they choose, particularly the yarns that Paige chooses, are right up my alley. So I've been very tempted, but I'm holding strong. I'm making note of the yarns that I like, and hopefully I can get them a little bit cheaper if I go to Europe later in the year. A yarn no buy is by no means my only goal for the year. I have many other goals which I have recorded in a sort of knitting bingo card. I just want to go through quickly some of the things I've already ticked off, only 1 quarter into the year. So I have knit something for myself. All 3 of these things that I knit already are for myself, so consider that done. I'm on track to knit 10 things. I haven't done it yet, but it's looking like I'll achieve that goal. When it comes to whips, so I have 2 whips from last year that I wanted to finish. My book club cardigan is still very much in hibernation, but my other whip, which are some fingerless gloves, I've decided to frog them. I haven't frogged them yet, but I have decided to do that. I never liked the colour. It was always a problem for me. They're a tiny bit tight. And then lately I've seen some people knitting some really beautiful tabby mittens or trigger finger gloves. So the forefinger is separated from the rest of the fingers. So it's like a mitten with an extra digit. And I really want some of those. So I want to rip that yarn out and use some of my leftovers from this colourwork jumper to knit something that's in a bit more of a colour scheme that I like, and maybe incorporate that tabby style mitten also. So yeah, my whip pile has reduced by 1 mentally. I should go frog that, so it's done. So that means I only have 1 whip left over from last year. I think I'll focus on that a little bit later in the year. It's also quite complicated cables, so much like this low tide sweater, I don't think I could work on them both at the same time. For saddle shoulder, this jumper has achieved that goal. I'm loving this construction technique, and I think it's something I will use again going forward. I love the way the saddle shoulders look when they're finished too, like a nice masculine style of shoulder. So yeah, consider that almost done. I used double knitting in this beanie. So I learned to double knit, the brim is double knit. And although that's not a neckline or collar, which is what I had written in my goal. So maybe you don't consider that checked off yet. I will use that new skill in a future jumper, and then we can check that one off. Stranded colorwork is check. Circular yoke, check. I haven't done steeking, but I have grafted twice already this year. So my comfort levels for cutting my knitting is quite high, maybe too high. I kind of just go for it. When I was cutting this beanie to graft some extra length into it, I did cut like way off the lines. I cut into the actual bit that I wanted to keep, but it's not the end of the world. And a late addition to my knitting bingo card was to do a test knit. So I can also check that off. Now, in terms of non-knitting achievements, this video will be my 10th video. I started filming for the channel 3 months ago, and I'm really glad to see that so many of you are enjoying it. I've been really surprised by how many lovely comments and interactions I get. Yeah, it's really kind of blown me away. I almost thought that nobody would watch my videos, but it's nice to know that there are some people out there who enjoy them. It's been a really great non-work related creative outlet. I'm a very creative person. I did a lot of arts and music growing up, and I haven't really had an outlet for that lately. And it's given me a chance to share some of my hobby with you. So I don't have anyone in my life who knits, who I can really talk to about it. I'll tell my family and friends about it, and they kind of nod along, but they don't understand it. So it's kind of nice to have someone or a camera to talk to about knitting, and then it's great when you guys respond and tell me about what you're doing and give me suggestions for what I should do. I also have a bit of an ongoing personal goal for the last few years. I've been trying to improve my confidence and improve my public speaking skills. So I feel like this counts. This is really helping with that. It takes quite a bit of confidence to stare at yourself on camera for many, many hours. I knew I'd love the research part of making videos, and I knew I could probably get around the filming part, but actually the editing of the videos has been a surprise. I never really thought about it before. I knew editing must have taken time, but I was surprised by how much time it actually takes. And I love the thumbnail design part of things. I'd never really put much thought into that either, and I feel like I'm making progress there. My battery is flashing, so let's see how long I can get out of this. Some of my upcoming video plans are for an autumn plans video where I want to solidify what I want to knit over the next 3 months. I want to share with you my soon-to-be complete 3D printed sock knitting machine. Once I finish these whips, I want to do a project recap on those, of course. I'm thinking I'll do some more data analysis videos too. Maybe looking into some projects or stashes on Ravelry and see what I can kind of glean out of there. Or maybe some pattern recommendation videos. I was thinking corporate friendly patterns or business formal appropriate patterns might be something interesting. I could round some of those up and share them with you. I'm also interested in exploring the process of learning how to be a knitwear designer. I'm not sure I want to be a career knitwear designer, but I think the process would be interesting to learn about grading and designing a pattern, and then share that with you guys. In my research, I even came across a knitting programming language, which might be fun to talk about. I've got lots of ideas, but I'd also really like to know what kind of knitting topics that you want to see. There's no point making in what everyone else is making. I want to hear what you feel like is missing from the knitting YouTube world. What do you want to know? That's just about it. My camera's about to die. The sun is setting. I'll leave it there. So let me know your thoughts, and I hope to see you back here again soon.